Jack Kavanaugh is the CMO of Foreplay,
a marketing tool that helps Facebook and TikTok advertisers spy on their competitors and steal their ads.
We copied a business.
Brands are looking for the truth, whereas agencies are trying to look good, right?
You're only looking at the data that's applicable to your brand, and that's not really representative of the market at large.
I don't know if the word is a dig, but on account managers
don't work. Change needs to happen because the market's changing, right? And this is an industry that moves really quickly.
People need to just get back to basics. Like, come on, is this product something that, your mum would buy, your gran would buy, your auntie would buy?
It's actually really hard to maintain the level of agility.
I think that's one thing people should be attacking as much as they possibly can, is get the lead time down.
No cash to buy your inventory? That kind of sucks, right?
So Jack, tell me, what are the key moves that got you into being the chief marketing officer of Foreplay? It's a tool that we use every single day in the agency. We really like the tool. The UI, the UX is amazing. How did you come about becoming CMO of the company?
I think there's a few things. So I got my start in e-commerce with my first brand. I was at university and I had no money. I was working in a speakeasy bar, serving elaborate cocktails to rich mums and their boy toys. It was a very weird bar, super regal. Nearly all the customers were cougars or polished young professionals in designer clothes. I used to call them the Armani boys. There was a group of guys that would come in and they were jacked in skin tight Emporio Armani t-shirts, right? So they were good guys. They were fun guys. It was just a category of person that was at this bar. One cocktail took 5 minutes to make, and everyone wanted a cocktail 5 minutes ago. So I ended up making software for audio people, mostly music producers, for electronic dance music like dubstep and trap music and that sort of stuff. But we ended up working with the team that composed orchestral music for Marvel's animated series on Netflix. Our stuff was used for Red Bull's stunt plane videos and in a video game called Overwatch. It wasn't actually in the game. I'm not sure if you've heard of the game. It was in a trailer for a new character that was getting released, which was good fun. A bunch of famous dubstep DJs and stuff were using our stuff, which was pretty cool. I took a risk. I put $1,000 that I'd saved up from my part-time clothing store job into ads on Facebook. And I was lucky enough to get about $10,000 back. And I was blown away because in UK, you might remember, we have this student overdraft. I'm not sure if it's still around now, but you could max out minus £2,000 and not pay any interest, right?
Yeah.
So I
did the exact same thing. I remember the day I got my overdraft when I was 18. I think it was £1,500 at the time. It was whoa, free money. I don't have to pay this back for 3 years. I think it's more than 3 years. 3 years at university and then another couple of years, and I ended up using that to trade and stuff. So we've been in the same shoes. So,
yeah. I mean, my lifestyle while I was at university, I was having a lot of fun. So I was constantly at minus 2,000, and I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I didn't want to ask for any money from my parents, so I got a bunch of part-time jobs to pay it off and stay afloat, pay my rent, right, buy food, right. So I started the business. Put a bunch of money into Facebook ads. We copied a business entirely. I literally scrolled to the bottom of their Facebook page and copied, because it was back then in the days where everyone was building their businesses on Facebook. And I copied every single post they made, right? And I'd maybe change a few, especially the ones that were product-centric, to be about our products. But the whole product category, we completely ripped it. Every post that they posted, I was like, well, it worked for them, so let's try it for us, right? And that was the birth of the business, right? So I was blown away. I suddenly had some money, more than I could spend on my lifestyle. So I put the $10,000 back in, and then I had a business. And I hired all my friends, which was a big mistake. But cut a long story short, it was a fun ride. We sold for next to nothing. Next to nothing. It wasn't that bad. I think we could have got a little bit more. And then I spent some time enjoying life, traveling around the world. I met my girlfriend, now fiance, while doing a Muay Thai camp in Thailand. I worked for a few agencies, a few household name brands, and I realized that there was something that I could really help people with. I was watching basically marketing graduates, mostly creative people, run or ruin these businesses' market participation, right? Things like, and I should say, it's not really to their fault. It's, in their own best interests, right? For their survival and their job. They would do things like extending attribution windows, including view-throughs, so that the ROAS metric looks good. Even expanding geo-targeting outside of their converting demos just to get a lower cost per click. It was all centered around what's the one or two metrics that I can pull together to tell a story about how I'm doing my job very, very well, right? So sure, your cost per click is lower. if you go wide, but like, do you want to pay for all those clicks from it?
Do you tend to find that was a problem more agency side than brand side? Because surely brands are looking for the truth, whereas agencies are trying to like look good, right?
It was definitely agency side. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you. It was definitely an agency side problem. And I think it was just part of it was natural, right? You had creative people who were in marketing seats suddenly having to make decisions about numbers. A lot of these numbers are just totally made up, right? Trying to, focus on, whatever the efficiency metric of the brand owner's focus or the agency's focus is, right? Trying to consolidate all of performance into one number, right? Because then it's simple. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that maybe you need different people for different, focuses in the business, right? So I started consulting for agencies, helping them improve their service delivery. Nothing big, small little mom and pop shops, like 5 to 20 people agencies, by building roles and training up team members that reliably take affordable talent, new graduates, and turn them into e-commerce ninjas. So they're improving their client outcomes. Everyone's happy, and we're maximizing the lifetime value of the client to the agency. And some of those people are friends, right? Some of them own their own brands. There's one of my close friends who I used to work with at one of the agencies. He has 3 jewelry brands right now, and they're all doing pretty well, but one of them is crushing it. So he's done a great job. And then, I spent some time working at different agencies, came across Foreplay. I was like, I love this concept, right? Not only can we find inspiration and save it so that we're not, having to scroll to the bottom of a Facebook page to copy all their posts, right? But you can base your marketing strategy on what other brands have already tested and found is working. I got really passionate about that because a lot of the time you're working with marketing teams, they're looking at their best performing ads, right? They're like, oh, this worked the best for us, so let's iterate on this. I think that's a perfectly fine idea. I actually think that's way better than most of the data analysis that gets done at agencies or in brands. But there's a base rate neglect there. You're only looking at the data that's applicable to your brand, and that's not really representative of the market at large. So what is the market at large doing? What are the key players that are gobbling up market share in your niche doing right now with their advertising? And that can be your starting point. So I got pretty passionate about that. Foreplay was part of my recommendation to every agency that I worked with. It was the light bulb moment for some of the brand owners and the agency owners to be able to see exactly what other people are doing with their advertising, especially direct competitors, is instantly recognizable as valuable, right? So when I met Zap,
did you tend to find that people were already using ads library? Oh, my camera zoomed in. That caught me off guard. Do you tend to find that like people already using ad library and then used or just didn't even know about it, didn't even know it existed, and then you just introduced this as like a research method?
I think that it was. I guess it's a bit of a mix. I think people were using ads library, right, to some extent. I think that more of those light bulb moments came from people who were totally fresh to seeing what their competitors were doing outside of being delivered in their feeds. But at the same time, there were people using ads library, but then taking screenshots. And then that inspiration would end up in a group chat or in a Slack thread, and then never make its way to an executed ad, like actual inspiration as input into your marketing outputs, the ads that you make. So there's that piece, right? Like actually saving those ads and using them in a productive way. But I would say that for the most part, these brands had never seen these compliance tools, whether it's Facebook Ad Library, it's Google Transparency Center, or TikTok Top Ads. Right, so Foreplay was an entirely new way to not just save those ads, but actually to identify them in the first place.
Got you. And then how did you then segue from being a user of the tool? I guess because you understood the pain point, right? You already kind of made your own ads. You've been advising other people on how to make their ads. How did you segue from being a user and recommending it to then, speaking to Zach and getting in as a CMO?
So I think this is interesting. It's kind of a long story, but the long story very short is spending time at so many agencies. There are interesting dilemmas that you have to work through, especially with smaller mom and pop shop agencies. You have furniture. That's kind of like the derogatory term that I use for people who don't want to stay up to date. And this is an industry that moves really quickly, right? So if you have people at the agency that are like, I just want to continue doing what I did yesterday and last week and last month, that can really stop change in the positive direction. And change needs to happen because the market's changing, right? You need to stay up to date. So and then sometimes that was really distasteful. If you come in as an external consultant to an agency, you're like, hey guys, I think that maybe we should change this up. Maybe we should launch more than 1 ad or 2 ads a month. And somebody's like, oh, that means I have to do more work. I don't like Jack. So like that was a pain point for me in the agency space. Obviously, working around that is a mark of my ability to help the agency, right? And working with those people, positioning, improving the quality of deliverables as their idea and not mine is a big part of success, right? You need to sell your ideas and be persuasive so that people actually take steps in the best direction for the brands that you're working with. There was other dynamics as well, like, account managers. I had account managers say, it's not my job to retain the client. And I'd think in my head, I'd be like, that's your only job, is to like achieve client outcomes that keep the client around for as long as possible. We want to continue doing mutually beneficial business with each other for as long as possible, right?
Yeah,
So,
I just want to segue into a little bit of I don't know if the word is a dig, but on account managers, like the title for me gives me a little bit of like an uncomfortable feeling, right? From my point of view, and we run an agency, we work as an affiliate. We don't actually have account managers. We just have media buyers, and we just get the media buyer to talk directly to the brand, because in the end, the decision maker at the brand always just wants to talk about somebody who's controlling the money, right? And they don't want this kind of person in between that is coordinating between everybody, right? So we do have media buyers doing the account management. That has its pros and cons. Pros being they're in touch with the money, they know what's going on, they can be very responsive to that, and they can therefore design the strategy around that. The downside being is, generally speaking, those people are not really the best people coordinators, the best creative people, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, just talk to me about your thoughts on like the account manager role. Do you think it's still relevant in D2C brands?
I think it's a non-ideal solution to the problem that a lot of agencies experience, right? You want maybe your media buyer, your creative strategists to be zeroed in on the thing that only they can do, media buying, creative strategy, right? And when I say only that they can do, that is their specialization. So it's their highest ROI activity. But the reality is that when you're working with clients and you're trying to achieve client outcomes, that communication piece is part of it, right? Maintaining the relationship and meeting their expectations is a huge part of it. And any disconnect there with an account manager, a non-technical person, they have to be golden. They have to be so good, right? And I think that it would probably be an oversimplification to say account managers don't work. Everyone should do things the way that I would recommend. It works for some agencies, doesn't work for others. But I do definitely prefer the idea of having specialists, people who are really good at a few things, directly engaging with the brand, so the brand can negotiate what it is that they want to be part of the next steps. Because strategists, people who are drawing the map from A to Z, right? They aren't the decision maker. At the end of the day, that has to be negotiated with the brand, right?
Yeah, I tend to find one of the difficulties I have is like really good media buyers are good data analysts, and they are like kind of techie, sometimes not the best communicators, right? They have a certain like all of our media buyers are STEM grads, right? They've all done maths, engineering, something to that effect, right? So they're numbers people. It depends on the client that they're dealing with, but some clients are like super easy to talk to on that front. You can have an engineer in front of a client and the conversation just flows very nicely. When you have bigger brands where maybe DT is just a part of what they do, and you've got a bigger marketing team and you're dealing with a CMO, and they've got like, a branding team and a paid media team and a PPC team, and it's all kind of like spread out. One of the frustrations that we have is that the people on the other side, so on brand side, don't really understand talking to a media buyer. It's really like hard for them to decode what they're saying in words that make sense. And that's where I feel like that account manager role comes in. It really is for like bigger brands where they need that kind of more stakeholder management. I don't know if you've seen a similar dynamic in the difference between bigger companies and smaller companies.
I've seen agencies that have fired all of their account managers, all of their media buyers to opt into creative strategists. And I've seen, I would say from now, previously, my surface area on agencies was quite small, and the size and caliber of agency was quite small too when I was consulting with agencies. But now I have so much surface area with Foreplay, and the agencies that I see that are delivering results the most consistently and having the best success rates for the clients, keeping the client around for the longest and driving the outcomes that client wants, have A players, right? Talent as a percentage of revenue for the business is just increasing all the time. And communication is a prerequisite, right? Because it's all fine and well being excellent at what you do, but if you can't communicate and work in a team effectively, and not being able to communicate makes you less compatible with the rest of the team, whether it's internal or it's external with the brand, then things start to fall apart, right? Unless you have, that Swiss Army knife account manager that can keep up with the media buyers and understand technical things that by definition of being an account manager, they don't, right? And balance that relationship with the client. But, there are questions that they're not going to be able to answer from the brand that the media buyer ultimately is responsible for answering. So I think that the way that you guys have it, that obligation to communicate with the brand is probably setting a standard that calls people to be the best that they can be. Sure, you can be a wizard at the thing that you zero in on, but you can never drop the ball on communication, because this is just a skill that everyone has to have, especially when you're in such a creative role, not just a creative role, interpersonal role, where relationships are inescapable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny because I'm thinking back to a situation I'm having myself, right? Where, we have software developers, right? And I feel like they're also kind of like very technical and have a certain way of speaking. And you almost have to decode what people are saying and try to be able to talk their language. And often they want to talk technical, right? And I'd say media buyers is not so hard as speaking to developers. With developers, when I speak to them, it's like they're speaking French to me, right? Media buyers, at least, I kind of understand what they're saying most of the time. Like 99% of the stuff they say, it all makes sense. I find that the more technical the role, the more decoding is required, and the more like you've really got to get into their language and get into understand like what is it they're actually trying to say. And it's very rare that I find somebody who's like really technically proficient and is able to break down concepts in a way that make complete sense to me. So usually I have to bridge the gap. I usually have to like go and play in their field rather than asking them to come and play in my field. And honestly, all I do is I just screenshot the combos, put them into GPT and say, hey, can you just put this in language that an actual human being can understand? And that's what I honestly end up doing. And it's so funny because we speak to our software developer and got a group chat with me and one of the other partners of the business. And like we both do the same thing, and we didn't know that we were both doing it, but the two partners were separately going onto GPT, screenshotting the conversation and saying, hey, what does this even mean? So yeah, it's something that's necessary, I think, when dealing with working with technical people, and to get the best out of them, you've got to do that. It's just mandatory, and in my position, I see myself as like the kind of glue between everybody. And so I have to talk lots of different languages in the company. I have to talk like a media buyer, talk like a developer, talk like a strategist, talk like an editor, right? I need to know all that verbiage, that technical terminology. I need to be able to talk in a way that makes sense for them, that they can just express themselves without having to like over-explain small concepts, right? So yeah, I think that's a big thing.
The quality or the speed of your communication is going to suffer. I think that like as a leader, you might relate with this. You have to be almost a subject matter expert on everything you're leading people on. You have to understand the intricacies intimately well, just to make sure that, and when I say intricacies intimately well, you're not going to zero in and be the specialist that you've employed to do the job for you. But you need to understand it well enough to keep the ball moving in the right direction, right? To sail the ship, right? To be the leader. Because otherwise, I'm thinking about product teams now at software companies like Foreplay. If you're in the product team and you're having to communicate with technical developers, you can't be speaking entirely different languages. Otherwise, nothing moves forward, right? The product team has to be technical to the extent that they can transfer information, and the development team, the devs, have to be proficient enough at speaking like a layman to receive that information from the product team, right?
Yeah. I think it was Sam Ovens who said this, that you've got to be T-shaped. I mean, he probably stole it from somewhere else, where like you have a set of skills that kind of go across like this, that don't have to be super deep, but you've got like a wide set of experiences that means you know a lot about different sectors of the business. And then you have like a leg of the T, right? And that's the area of like real competence, the thing that you're like really, really, really exceptional about. And I think good leaders are T-shaped. They do understand a bit about everything enough to know what good looks like, to know like, to be able to talk their language so you can encourage people to do the job to the best of their ability, right? And definitely working with software developers, that's something we've been doing more recently over the last year or so. That's been a steep learning curve for me, man. That's been like a seriously steep learning curve. And I know you're in the SaaS community and stuff, but that's a whole different ball game. It makes it feel easy having a conversation with a media buyer. That no longer feels difficult. It's just like, that's pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah. What's interesting though? Like, I think this is pretty entertaining. I've seen agencies that have people running the agency and running the teams that are not T-shaped at all. They actually don't understand the first thing about any of the things, the services that they're providing, right? And that leads to a calculation error, right? They're either massively overpaying their team or not getting enough bang for buck from their team. So, imagine agency with owners slash, C-suite employees, executives that have no idea how ads are bought on Facebook, Google, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever it happens to be, have no idea how emails are created, what platforms, how long it should take. They end up, sometimes, and like I was saying before, in the situation where an agency is delivering 2 ads a month to a brand, and the owner of the agency has no idea that that's actually not meeting the expectation until the brand says, hey, wait, you haven't made anything for me and I don't know how long. And the people working for that brand at the agency will go, oh, this brand has unrealistic expectations, churn, burn, bring on another client. Right? So it's I think that situation is it is when you have really bad leadership, right? They don't understand the languages of the team.
Do you know, like, I have a very common set of experiences, especially when working with like larger companies who have like that larger marketing team, right? And your CMOs have never even been into Ads Manager. They don't even have a profile on Ads Manager. They don't have view access. They literally don't know what's going on, right? It's just a number in a spreadsheet. They've never been onto Ad Library. They've never been into a tool like Foreplay. They've never been into Motion or whatever reporting tool that is that they use. They've not even logged into Klaviyo. They don't even know what that is, right? And you're thinking, like, how are you able to make C-level decisions if you don't even understand what tools you're using and why? Like, everyone's running around underneath you and doing a bunch of stuff, making decisions where they could be using your input from your experience, but you're just not in a position where you can make those decisions. So for me, for a D2C brand to succeed and to have a really good CMO, in my head, first of all, like, I think the CMO title is more for like old school companies, traditional companies, and head of growth seems to be where like performance marketers end up, right, when they kind of get into that like top level positions. And then on occasion, I've heard chief growth officer, I guess, for the people who have really got their heads screwed on. But there's definitely a distinct difference between those two categories of people, and I think that the CMOs in the traditional companies are kind of blind to what it actually means to be a growth marketer. And I wish they just knew, so they could just go and hire somebody in their team to do it. And I've had conversations with CMOs, events and things where I'm just like, you just don't get it. Log into Ads Manager for once, launch an ad, make an ad, write scripts, just do something, do an edit. And I like to think about myself as someone who like tries to do a bit of everything. And I love getting stuck in the details, but I also can't, because I end up getting stuck into too many things and then I can't do them all. So I have to be more calculated with which projects I take on the front line. And I have a few projects that I'm working on at the moment, but I think that if you really don't understand what's going on the front line, you're not able to make good decisions at the top. I think that's what it comes down to.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm like, maybe it's my confirmation bias speaking, but I couldn't agree more. From the spreadsheet to the data analytics to actually creating the creative, do you understand all of these things intimately well enough that you can actually delegate someone to do them on your behalf and have an expectation for how good it should be, right? Does it meet your expectation for quality? That's subjective, but it has to meet your expectation if it's going to meet your brand's expectation if you're working for a client, and then it's going to meet the expectation of the market, right? It could meet your expectation, then fail to meet the brand's expectation, and you failed, right? You haven't been the appropriate filter of quality that faithfully represents the brand in a way that they would accept, right? And then that individual in that capacity has failed. And then maybe it passes through both your expectations and the brand expectation and fails in the market, and then something's broken down. Back to the strategist, back to the brand. The onus is on us to improve the quality of the creative. But I couldn't agree more. How are you supposed to direct those sorts of initiatives that are going to be successful if you don't understand the first thing about them?
And again, just talking on agencies, and like, I love bashing agencies, which is funny because like I run an agency, right? And I also like, I mean, we're moving away from agency model. We're moving more towards like being an affiliate, just because like we want to put skin in the game, and we know we're competent, so we just spend our own money on ads, right? So like with agencies, what I tend to find is like everyone's been stung by so many different agencies. Whenever I go to an event, if I say I run an agency, I get the same body language from everybody. They're all like trying to exit the conversation like this. It's kind of funny. Exact same response every single time. And I think it's because this dynamic of how, it's not, the relationship between agencies and brands hasn't been handled correctly. There's not been good decision making, not been good communication. And back to what you said about like churn and burn, so many agencies are good at sales. They sell the dream. Maybe the founder's good at something, but operationally, they can't go and execute on the service. And I witnessed it myself being, we have agencies that we work with, sub agencies, that do a bunch of different things for us. Founder's amazing. Founder will tell you everything, right? And then when it comes to the delivery of the team, you're like, hang on a second. I was sold by this dude who like knows everything, and he's not even looking at the account, So I think that's why agencies get a bad rep, and I can understand it.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what I think is pretty interesting about this, though, is that I think sometimes it's just the nature of the industry or the nature of business in general as well. What I mean by that is that, sure, agencies are in such a fast-moving environment. It's actually really hard to maintain the level of agility that makes you effective, right? And not only is it hard, but it might actually be statistically impossible. And what I mean by that is most ads fail, and we're pretty comfortable with that idea, right? There's a few ads that might hit a home run, change your business, but most ads, you would hope would not get very much spend because they're not going to be ROI positive, right? Most products fail, which is why you have bestsellers and dead stock, right? Some products do very, very well and make a business, and some products don't do very well. If you only have a one product store, that better be a really good product. And probably the only reason that it comes across your radar is because it is a good product and has product market fit. There's thousands is an underestimation. There are probably hundreds of thousands of one product stores that never got off the ground because that one product with all their chips on black just didn't work. And the same thing applies to businesses. Most businesses fail, and some businesses do well. And that's the nature, that's the industry, that's the environment that agencies are playing in. And that's not going to lead to, most of the time positive outcomes. When I've done an analysis of an agency, some of the bigger agencies that I've worked with, and they have success rates of like 50, 60%. I'm like, this is awesome, right? This is incredible. The brands that you're working with are growing most of the time, and some of the brands aren't. This is amazing, right? Because unless you have the type of agency, and some agencies do, where you're very picky about the clients that you work with because you have lots and lots of choice, right? You're going to work with some brands that are just going to struggle, right? I don't know. Let's say you worked with an MP3 player brand, right? You would expect that over time, sales are going to decline, right? You could do your best, right? But maybe there's not so much that you can do to change it in the process of going to market to change the actual market demand, right? Which is declining. Right?
Totally agree, man. I could not agree more. I think like for us now, we're very, very selective over the clients we work with. We only want to work with like a handful where we can kind of like put a lot of effort into scaling them up, because then we end up partnering with them and we just kind of end up growing together, right? And it's that the number one thing I'm looking for is like, would I buy the product? Like, would somebody I know buy the product? Does this product make sense? Does it offer make sense? Is it cheaper somewhere else online? Forget all the marketing and the creative and the media buying and all this like tinkering, right? People need to just get back to basics. Like, come on, is this product something that, your mum would buy, your gran would buy, your auntie would buy? Like, are they really going to buy it at that price? This buy two, get one free offer, or like this free gift with, purchase, like, are they going to go for it? Is the shipping threshold sensible for free shipping? These are the number one things I'm actually looking for when we take on a brand, because the other things we can fix, right? So we can fix the media buying, you can fix the creative, you can build landing pages, you can build email flows, you can fine tune the Google ads. But changing the product and the offer is like fundamental, right? And in the end, if the product and the offer sucks, I'd rather just work with somebody else, because I'm going to have a hard time. I'm going to have a really hard time trying to get that product to scale. And we've done it too many times. In the past, we've taken on brands like having all the ambition in the world, and, me being a bit more like visionary, I guess, like looking at a brand and thinking, I could do X, Y, Z. And like, if I just do all these steps and I encourage the brand to do them, the brand will grow. And I can tell you 9 times out of 10, it never works, because in the end, I'm not the founder of their company. They have to drive it. And even if I say, hey, if you just go and do ABC, probably something is going to work. They're on their own path, right? And like, sometimes they're more experienced in business, sometimes they're less experienced. But back to what you said, like, generally speaking, you have a few breakout brands that do absolutely amazingly. And I think things are like heavily skewed towards like a few things working, a few brands, a few content creators, a few products, a few offers. Often when we're working with a brand, it's just like one product that just carries everything, 90% of the sales. That's pretty typical. Same with content creators. I remember one brand we worked with, we tested probably 200 plus content creators. And like, I tell you now, just the top 3 to 5 consistently worked. And it's not like we were casting rubbish people. It's just those same faces were the ones that, got the best results. So we just kept using them, and, the learnings got compounded. They got better and better. So it almost became like, positive confirmation bias. And, so it's, in this industry, things are definitely skewed towards like a handful of things really working well. And that's why I think like it's really hard to run an agency where you've got a standardized service and you provide it to loads of people. Like for me, that is a business model, but for me, it's not a business model that I really enjoy. I think working with less brands and trying to problem solve and troubleshoot, that's interesting. But it doesn't really make a scalable agency because, you're always dependent on the founders or the key strategists in the company or someone who's incentivized by equity or profit, right? So the only way really to scale that kind of agency is you've got to have people working underneath you who've got some kind of upside if the client scales, right? A significant upside, a good upside. So yeah, that's why we've kind of moved more towards doing a video stuff because it just makes good sense for us. And yeah, I don't want to go to the party again and say I'm an agency owner and then like people are turning their body away from me because they think I'm about to pitch them. I'm like, I don't want to pitch your business. I don't want it. We're just busy enough.
Right. This just reminded me, and this is one of the reasons why I like that term growth, because there's a lot of different things that go into growth than just marketing, right? Marketing being the process of taking product to market and telling people about it, right? When I talk about marketing, sometimes I picture like an actual market store that's selling, I don't know, fruits, vegetables, or like, I don't know, or trinkets, necklaces and stuff. Right? You're taking your product to market so that people can buy it. That's not everything in a business, right? So, you've got your gross margin. How much is it costing you to take your product, right? To make it in the first place, to take inventory, right? And that's a huge part of whether your product is going to be feasible, right? Like, so if you have a product and you're like, oh, my gross margin is amazing. I bought it for $50. I'm selling it for $100. But do people buy at the price point of $100? You don't have that margin anymore if you can't actually command that price. So the gross margin is so important and so outside of the scope of of an agency or of a marketing partner. But maybe it's in the scope of a growth partner.
100% agree. Yeah, it's like it's the first thing we do. We get the unit economic sheet and we work out like, is this product actually profitable? And it still shocks me till now how few founders actually know their true margin down to the the penny, the cent, right? And they don't consider all the costs in the chain. They just think, okay, my supplier told me this FOB price from the factory, and like that's it, right? Like, what about all the shipping to get it from China to the port, and then from the port across, and then all your taxes, and then like, do you know what happens if the taxes change? Like, have you put the tariff in there? Like the final mile shipping as well. Like, have you looked at have you done a weighted average of what your final mile shipping cost is across all your customer base, or are you just assuming that it's like the average number in the middle, right? Because it's not always the same, and that's often shipping is the same cost as the cogs of the product, and yet people are not even drilling down into this to see like what's going on down there and all this stuff. For me, I actually trained as an accountant, and my background is in like accounting. So like me looking at this stuff, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, work out your actual unit economics, work out your actual margin. And when I always know the founder who doesn't know the numbers, because I say to them, okay, what's our target? What's our break even for us, right? Like, what do you need us to hit? And like, how are you measuring it? And they're like, just go for like a 1.6 or a 1.8, something between there will be fine. I'm just thinking you're probably doing bank balance accounting, which means you're looking at your bank balance and looking at if it's going up or going down, right? If it's going up, you get happy. If it's going down, you get sad. And I'm just thinking, how are you planning your inventory? How are you planning your provisions for tax? And I've seen a lot of businesses go bust and get into serious trouble because they've not been able to pay their tax, or they just don't have enough cash to scale inventory because they've not thought ahead about cash planning. So I think you can't really, to say that we're in marketing, I think is a bit of an understatement, really, because we're really in marketing and accounting, like at the same time. The truth is, we're looking at the unit economics, we're drilling down into what's profitable, we're figuring out where to focus our advertising spend, and it changes dynamically every day. And I'm always encouraging clients to get a daily P&L if they don't have one already. I think in D2C ecom, you need to be tracking your contribution margin every single day down to the cent, having provisions for everything that you need to have in place. And that's like number one, so it's what we said is like the product and the offer has got to be right. And then you've got to really understand your gross margin. If you don't understand your gross margin, then I'm sorry, but it's not going to scale because like, you don't know what you're doing. Like how are you going to go and buy your next round of inventory,
Right. How are you going to buy your next round of inventory? This is an interesting one. And this is, I think, also why you need organizations like yours and not just typical marketing agencies. Because even a good marketing agency, forget the ones that I was talking about before, little mom and pop shops that are just, churning, burning clients. A good marketing agency, right? I should say that while I say that, I acknowledge that some of those might be watching this.
Yeah.
You weren't all bad. There's just like, a couple, and they do give a bad name the type of business at large, right? When you unfortunately, prioritize your employees being comfortable at the expense of delivering for your clients. But for the agencies that do deliver, sometimes they just sell it through inventory too fast, right? If you imagine like you've got, 10 units to 100 units of a product and you're selling through 10 a day, you've got 10 days of inventory left. Your lead time's 45 days. turn off marketing for that product. Stop taking it to market, because that additional cost, you're trading that cost, right, just to sell through the inventory faster, right? And these are the sorts of things that if you work with a typical marketing agency, they're incentivized to just sell through it as fast as possible. Hey, we sold out, success, right? But then people can't buy that product again for 45 days or whatever.
Exactly. And what's insane is, like, every time you acquire an additional customer, the marginal cost of acquiring the next customer is more than the cost of acquiring the previous customer, right? So, like, what you said is exactly correct. You should be just scaling down your marketing spend, because generally speaking, your return, your margins are going to be higher at lower spend than they are going to be at higher spend. So if you're running out of stock, just have a higher margin for a little bit, right? Cash in. Like, why are you still trying to scale at the same margin and just run out of stock? And then your customers get pissed off because they can't, they come on your website and they can't buy the product. It looks bad reputationally. So, unless that's your strategy about doing, hyping up and hyping down, but that's different. That only works for certain products.
I've seen this happen in a really, sorry to speak over you. I've seen this happen in a really interesting way with a marketing agency that really over-delivered and went above and beyond for all of their brands. Running the typical Black Friday sale like 4 or 5 weeks out of Black Friday, right? Getting early access to that wallet share, to that discretionary disposable income before all of the other brands have gone live with their Black Friday sale. And they sell through the best sellers and some wider inventory like in the first week. And everyone's celebrating. But now you have additional labor costs to fulfill these orders. Orders are slow, right? So people are leaving bad reviews. They're not going to come back and buy again because it took like 6 weeks for their product to arrive. They're not able to come back and buy more because there's no inventory. And for that peak period of demand where you could have taken a lower cost of acquisition and still sold through all of your inventory, you have no inventory to sell. And then the worst part of all of this is because you incurred marketing cost to sell through that inventory as fast as possible, again, a week as opposed to a month or a month and a half, right? A month would have been fine, right? A week, the different brands have different strategies, and maybe this isn't the worst problem in the world. But, sell through it in a week, and then you have that marketing cost that's come out, and you now have to rebuy inventory. You want to grow, so you want to buy more inventory, but you can't afford it, right? Now you have to use debt to rebuy your inventory, which is fine. Probably the right thing to do anyway. But, no cash to buy your inventory, that kind of sucks, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is, like, I think people don't talk about this in DC enough. If you're able to reduce your lead time on your inventory, you can reduce the amount of cash you've got to outlay, because effectively you can just order last minute, right? If your lead time is a week, you don't need to put cash into stock because you just know you can get it back in stock in a week, right? If your lead time is, I have one client where the lead time is 10 months on products. I like, how are we going to scale? Yeah, how are we going to scale? We've just got to plan everything ahead and make some assumptions, right? Like some serious assumptions, and we can't base it on like what we know a month or two before, which would be great because we know like how things are trending. So we're having to make like completely random decisions, and what ends up happening is we run out of stock. Black Friday, that client 2 years in a row run out of stock, nothing in stock, and it's like, dude, we missed out on so many sales because your lead time on your product is 10 months. That sucks. So like, I think that's one thing people should be attacking as much as they possibly can, is like get the lead time down. Like, does that mean even onshoring it, bring it manufacturing to your local country just to get the lead time down to like, a few weeks or, a couple months? That can all make all the difference to the amount of cash you've got to outlay to actually scale a brand. And I feel like people don't really get this. And that's part of my frustration working with clients, is when we're doing well on the ads, but we're capped by the fact that they can't go and get inventory. We've had this before where like clients doing well, they're scaling from like 5 million to 10 million to 12 million. And then they're like, oh, dude, we've got to scale back because like I just run out of money. I've got no cash in the bank. I'm like, dude, I just saw your Lambo on your Insta story. Like, what the fuck's going on?
Oh, man. Yeah, I've never worked with a brand that's like onshored their production. I'd love to. I think it's exciting. I listened to the Operators podcast and I heard them talk about this leather brand that did it and who did it really well. It worked out quite well for them. I'd love to see it happen. Yeah, it is ultimately the business owner and the business's responsibility to uphold that piece. And it's a significant constraint to the marketing team, whether they're internal or external, right? The last piece, so you got that product level profitability, like the cost to take inventory to make your product and fulfill it to your customers, right? It needs to be understood in relationship to the price, right? And ideally be favorable, right? Be a good discrepancy so that you can afford to do marketing. And then you have market level profitability, which is quite popular right now, contribution margin. And I think at the other end, you have net profitability, which again, the agency, the marketing team is not responsible for at all, right? As brands grow and they move through revenue ranges, sometimes the OPEX can grow quite a lot and become a very significant obligation for the business to be much bigger than it is. And then you have to go all the way back to the start and be like, well, we need enough inventory, and then we need, by some stroke of luck or talent, the most incredible marketing to move that higher inventory just to meet the ever expanding OpEx obligation of the business that's just been created because the founder wants to spend more time on the golf course. No, I'm not saying that in a denigrating way. I think that's actually a good thing, right? To go and spend your time doing these things. But if the OpEx grows and you become a very bloated business with a lot of obligations, the rest of the business has to change to support that, right?
Do you know it's funny, right? If you ask any business owner like how much money do you make in a year, none of them could probably answer you like what the question is, because the truth is it's like you're just constantly chasing something else to do, right? And you don't know how much money you're physically making at the end, you're right? And that's quite a tough number to pin down. Totally agree with everything you're saying. We didn't finish a story of how you got into being the CMO. We got to the point of what were we talking about? We missed the end of the story.
Well, it was, what you were saying about events. So I was going to a few e-commerce events and I kept seeing Zach, and I was a customer of Foreplay. I've been, taking every agency that I touched and getting them onto Foreplay and integrating it into their workflows so that they could actually deliver better results for the brands they were working with. And I'd see Zach at these events and I'd be like, oh, I'll go speak to him. But I'm just so chatty that I'd talk to everyone. I'd be locked into a conversation. I'd be like, I'll speak to him later. And then finally we got the opportunity to talk and I said, hey, I think we can do something cool. So we're building this next product together. I'm wearing that hat that you spoke about before, talking to devs and trying to navigate that. But the devs are awesome. They actually speak English and it's very easy to communicate with them. So the speed and just how exceptional the product's turning out is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's like and I'm not by no means like affiliated, although I should get an affiliate link from you guys, I think. But I just really enjoy using the product. Like, it's really good. Like, we use it every single day, and I've even built my own like ad library scripts, right? So I literally have already the tool to like do it for free, but I still use Foreplay because it's like way better. It's just taking care of like all the different like functionality that I wanted. So even though I've like gone and built it for free, I'm still paying for Foreplay because I think it's a great tool and it's like super easy for the team to use. So
that's it. Hey, intuitiveness and time to insight. This has been like a big focus of mine with the new product, is how do we dial in not just time to insight, time to getting the information that's useful? Because if the time is too long, then you actually don't have that information, right? If you have to read a whole book to get actionable information, then you're, 1 to 3 weeks out of having that information and being able to use it. But if it's right there in front of you and it's 2 clicks away, it's so much more actionable on a minute to minute, day to day, hour to hour, day to day basis. So that's one focus, is like, how do we get that information that either otherwise wasn't accessible before, it just took way too long, into the right people's hands? But then the other focus is time to product, right? So if you have sales representatives at an organization, their time to understanding what it is that works is very, very short. If they close the sale, they're going to do more of that. And if they don't close the sale and they drop the bag, then they're going to do less of that, right? And I think this is applicable in all aspects of your life when you're endeavoring to achieve something in a short enough time frame. And if you fail, you understand, well, I probably shouldn't do that again, right? I don't know, you're cooking and you touch the cast iron handle, right? You're going to go, oh, I've made a mistake. I'm not going to do that again. Next time I cook with a cast iron, I'm not going to touch the handle with a bare hand. So for the next product, that's something that I'd really like to, is a big part of the goal, is how can we dial in time to product? So it's not just the insight that you're getting very quickly, but you're getting as close to an instantaneous feedback loop about exactly what's working and what's not working. So you can do more of what works and less of what doesn't, right? So imagine, I don't know, you have a marketing team and you have no idea what works better, images or videos, right? But for a brand, maybe there's a clear winner, but you just don't have access to that insight. Maybe you could dig through it in Ads Manager or some analytics tool and find the answer and eventually use that information adaptively for your brand. But if the process is too long, like reading a book, it's not going to happen, right? So that process has to be so short and so unavoidable, right? It's there in your face and you can't escape it, that you're obviously going to do the next thing that is in the best interests of the brand, right? Whether that's working with an influencer, it's launching a particular type of ad, it's iterating on a type of ad, or it's running a certain type of hook again, right? You need that information that is the most adaptive to be right there for you, and you're positively incentivized to use it to the best outcomes of the brands that you're working with.
Yeah, it's about the categorization of information to get what you need to make the right decisions as a human being, right? And if that means using AI to help you to do that, amazing. But yeah, like just clear reporting, clear categorization for me, which actually brings me on to like a quote that I want to read to you, and I want to get your opinion on it. I think it was a meme that I actually got, and my business partner sent it to me, and it was something like, I'm going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of, I spent 10 hours automating a task that takes 10 minutes. I know exactly why he sent it to me, because like I'm guilty of this so badly. I would literally automate an entire process, like fiddle around with make.com or Zapier or build a script or work with a developer just to like not do that annoying 10-minute task that I really, really don't want to do. I'll almost procrastinate the entire task and spend 10 hours to automate the damn thing just so I don't have to do the 10-minute task again and again. And I'm guilty. I'll hold my hands up. I definitely do this all the time. I want to know what your opinion is on that quote and how you feel about it.
That automation is capital, right? I don't know how many times you have to do that 10-minute task, but if it eventually is going to rack up to 10 hours, then it was ROI positive, right? If it's just a 10-minute task and it took you 10 hours to automate a one-time 10-minute task that's not repeated, then yeah, I like the quote because it's saying, hey, maybe we're not using our time appropriately here. I think this is sort of in the bones of marketing and tech in general, is that these are people who are early adopters, want to use new tech, and are looking for arbitrage, right? The whole endeavor of performance marketing is, how can I increase that gap between input and output, right? And AI sort of seems to promise that, right? It's you're going to do very little, and it's going to do a lot for you, automate it for you. But, right, it can't be at the deficit of actually being efficient, right? So maybe it's capital. Maybe it lets you do that 10-minute task over and over again, and you've unlocked something that now no longer takes up mental bandwidth for you, because it just happens on autopilot, right? For example, I really like using Lindy right now, but like I don't actually ever want to go into Lindy. I don't want to go into ChatGPT. I don't want to go into Claude. I've set up Lindy to DM me in Slack, and all of that happens in Slack as if Lindy was an employee of mine, right? Because that's the place where I work, right? When I say where I work, I'm in there regularly enough that I can engage in a conversational. That's where I conversate. That's where I speak, right? And make things happen through the process of conversation. So yeah, Lindy messaging me in Slack is, maybe it took a little bit longer to, do XYZ task that I needed Lindy to automate for me, setting up that workflow in the first place. But if I can use that, and I also get Lindy to schedule those messages. So at 9:30 every morning, and then at 10, and then at 11:30, right? Certain things are being brought to my table for me to do, to give the necessary input and then refine it so that it's good to go. By what's kind of like digital employees, they're limited in their abilities because I'm not the most proficient user of Lindy, but they can do cool stuff like post blogs, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that, honestly, I don't know if it's just my algorithm or like probably maybe you have some similar things in your algorithm, but like I'm always seeing on LinkedIn, X, like wherever I look, some new workflow process system that somebody has built that's like saving them time, and they're making millions of pounds, and they're sitting on the beach and doing nothing because they're just using this system, right? And like I feel like it's just all like false hope and dreams just to sell whatever it is that they're selling. And like it's always like, hey, comment this and then you'll get this like perfect process, right? And like we're all guilty of it. We do it as well as marketers, right? Try and get all the free reach advantage. But I do feel like that's making me feel that kind of it makes me think too much about automation sometimes when I need to just sit down and do the damn work, right? And like often, man, if I just sit there and focus, like things get done. And often it doesn't mean like sit there and automate things. Often you're automating the wrong thing anyway. And like, I can't count how many times I've automated something, given it to somebody, expecting that they'll be able to go and use it and make value of it, and they've just not used it. They've just been like, this doesn't work. And I think that probably, it probably comes back into like product development as well. I imagine that, building Foreplay and building other SaaS tools to do it really effectively. And like we're building our own SaaS internally as well. What I'm learning through the process of building is that you really, 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 really need to make sure that you're getting all your users to give you feedback all the time on all your features.
Yeah.
Because like you just don't know what to build. Like you'll build something for yourself and you might use it, but you're not the user of the system, right? And the bigger your company gets, the further away you get from the actual end user of the system. As our agency has grown, our headcount has grown. I'm no longer in the day-to-day, in the trenches of doing the work. I'm further and further and further away from that delivery. So unless I'm taking feedback from those people, I can't actually build something that they can use every single day. And I don't know if you've done, I guess you probably do something similar, like as you're building Foreplay, but I guess you're speaking to your end users all the time to see like what would actually save them time rather than automating the thing that you think that you should do.
Yeah, well, man, so on a micro scale, I automate a bunch of things that I don't have to pay attention to them. I always have, because otherwise there would just be so many hours in my day that would be gobbled up by things that, I don't know, like getting groceries. I don't get my groceries. I don't cook food. I don't do laundry, because that would just eat up hours of my every day, of my every week. Right. So those things need to be automated so I can focus on things that are like higher ROI on my time. Right. And then I guess on your day-to-day, everyone's automating already. If you're running Facebook ads, you're not deciding who receives every single one of your ads, right? Facebook's automating that for you. I think that I couldn't agree more with you that sometimes you need to roll your sleeves up and get the thing done, right? But to the extent that's possible, if you can build something with your team, you automate with your team, right? You build a team of people to do certain things for you so that you can free up your time to do the thing that only you can do. Because you couldn't be in all of the ad accounts in every meta ad account, launching those ads if it was ultimately your responsibility to, I don't know, have the last look at it to add a perfecting touch, or for someone on your team to also do that for you so you can free up your time to do something else, right? So I think there's just there's such a range of different things that you can automate and different ways that we automate things in our lives that we might be incentivized to automate things before it's even possible, right? And what I mean by this is that I've jumped into a couple of these automation tools in the past, where Zapier can do some awesome stuff, right? And I've used Zapier for productive means a lot of times. But when I first jumped into, I don't know, Make or N8N, whether it's a combination of my not being capable of using the tool, or it's the tool actually just not being there yet, I struggled for like an hour, 2 hours, and I didn't come out with anything productive, and that doesn't feel good. I think a lot of people ended up in that situation and with that level of skepticism towards AI-based automation with the first few rounds of AI that were introduced and all the AI tools that spun off of the first models that came out, because you needed to be a prompt engineer, right? You needed to figure out, there was this learning curve that looked like Mount Everest that you had to triumph before you could do anything remotely productive. And maybe the idea of some profitable exchange of time was more popular than the actual outcome, right? People weren't actually automating things effectively. But when you can automate things, that's the only way that things get done, and you can free up your time to go do something else that's more powerful, right?
Yeah. I always kind of because I've got into this process of like over-engineering things in the past, right? And I definitely 100% guilty of that. And I think of like automation or just do the damn thing, right? And those are like my two kind of internal dialogues in my head. And I'm trying to lean towards do the damn thing now, rather than do the automation side. Although I do love automation, it's like my number one thing in any business that I work on. It's usually where I jump in and spend most of my time. But I try to just think, okay, should I just get this done? Should I just get somebody else to get this done? Can we just do it now? Like, is it going to move things forward very quickly? And I think it just comes back down to the point of, like you said, validate the fact that this 10-minute task does actually need to be done 100 times this week, or is it just being done 3 times and you just can't be bothered to do it 3 times because you feel like you should be doing something better, right? And I can say as a business owner, like often you just end up doing all the like horrible work that nobody else wants to do. You end up with all the random tasks that aren't allocated to anybody else, right? And so naturally, you end up getting all these tasks and absorbing them, and you only have a certain number of hours in a day. So you start to think about, how can I automate all these little individual bits so I can get them off my plate? Sometimes you just need to like give it to somebody else, or just do it, right? Stack it up and do it. And sometimes it means doing boring work. I think people have in their head that like entrepreneurship is like, I don't know what they've got in their head, right? Maybe the internet's told them a lie, but like I can tell you now, I just end up doing all the random stuff that nobody wants to do, which means in our office, if the ops manager's not here and the toilet needs fixing, I'm fixing the toilet. And like, it is what it is. You just have to do these things sometimes, we have our own office. We're not in a serviced office. We used to be. We actually got banned from WeWork because my business partner was riding his scooter through the corridors. Yeah, I mean, they kept our deposit, like scammers. But anyway, I probably shouldn't defame them publicly. They're already in enough trouble.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, yeah, they're really in trouble. I think that sometimes there's this like dichotomy between, and there's these two market forces, right, that are at play, right? There's doing something better, which a lot of agencies are, on the cusp of trying to do, aspiring to achieve. And to what we were talking about at the start of this conversation, those ones that are not trying to do that, or any individuals at those organizations that aren't trying to do that, are Luddites, right? They're an impediment to the agency actually delivering on their promise, right? And then there's abundance, right? Market forces that create abundance. That's the Shein, that's the Temu, that's Amazon, that's everything that's low cost and mass produced, right? And that's a positive market force. It's incredible. I actually think it's the only way that things get better, right? Is by creating abundance. Right? The analogy that I have is, I don't know, take butter, for example, right? In most modern economically developed countries, England, Canada, America, you can get butter for like a couple dollars a pound, right? And that's only through the process of creating a huge amount of butter, a huge amount of supply for the market demand, right? So that the price goes down, and producers of butter farms are lowering their prices and taking tighter and tighter margins. Not great for the farmers, but then the farmers sniff out margin somewhere else, right? They can either create more abundance with margarine, and no one really wants margarine, but I mean, the price is very low. So if you need a lot of butter, fake butter, you can go with margarine. And if you want something better, you can go with grass-fed butter, or I don't know, Italian olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. There's other options, right, for that premium product. And as the market saturates and there's a huge amount of supply created to meet those emerging demands for, like, let's say, grass-fed butter, the price of grass-fed butter comes down, right? Because more and more market participants, and if they want to win your dollars, they have to be price competitive. I think a lot of the e-commerce brands that we work with, D2C brands that we work with, are on that side of making something better, of making grass-fed butter instead of generic butter, because then you're competing with Temu or Shein, and that's not fun, right? They're trying to make something better for emerging market demands and winning their margins there. And over time, sometimes that gets saturated. It did for us with Foreplay, right? We were the first to this market, and now there's a huge amount of competitors that are saturating the supply in relationship to the demand. So it's on us, the onus is on us to make something better that people will continue to pay for, and maybe even pay more for, because without Foreplay, they wouldn't have access to those insights. It's something that's inaccessible from the generic alternative. Right?
Yeah. I think what you're ultimately saying is there's forces of supply and demand at play in the e-commerce industry, and we really need to focus on product development. Like, why are we not putting attention on product development, to create that point of difference? And I think if more marketers spend their time actually working with brands or working in brands to actually build products that people want based on market feedback, I think that naturally would make their life so much easier. Like, you wouldn't be worrying about like fine-tuning, your media buying, or like launching a zillion creatives every single second. Like, maybe if your product was actually good and people wanted it, they would just buy it.
Right. Or you have incredible marketing. I mean, like, this is one of the things that I think about now. There are great products out there that like ride the wave of demand, right? Like, I don't know, cold plungers, when Joe Rogan and Andrew Huberman are talking about them.
Oh yeah.
Or I don't know, plastic-free workout clothing. I've been seeing this around recently, no hormonal disruptors in the plastic clothing. There's demand there that they get to just tap into, but by providing supply to that demand. But also, part of the marketing can be for people who aren't even aware that there's a problem, right? People might not be aware of, I don't know, hormone disruptors and BPA and this, that, leaching into your skin from, I don't know, Lululemon leggings. And if you're able to make them aware, then you can generate that demand, right, for something better. So I think that, like, really good marketing, but then also, don't sell MP3 players, because
don't sell MP3 players. Man, I used to sell MP3 players in school. I remember it was my first thing I ever bought and sold was to my friends in school. I used to buy them off eBay, and then because they didn't have credit cards, and I was like 17, and I just asked my mom if I could use a credit card, and bought it off eBay, and I sold it to my friends in school. But that's like going back a long time. I don't think it'll work now.
I was actually never that person. There were kids at our school that were very entrepreneurial. They'd buy candy, they'd sell candy for more than they bought it for, and they would be very impressed with themselves, and good on them. They were doing a good job. I set up parties when I was in like the late years of high school and early years of university. I'd rent nightclubs and throw underage like discos, right? And for the schools that are in the area. It was good fun. But we got hit with a lot of fines because 15, 16, 17-year-old boys are chaotic,
Yeah.
We did one at a golf course, and it was like this lovely golf course, and We had friends that would DJ, and got over 1,000 kids from 3 different schools that were in our area to buy tickets to come to this event. Yeah, it was insane. It was insane, though. There was blood all over the bathroom in the golf course. There was somebody had defecated on the golf course. Fences had been burnt down. So we got hit with. Yeah, it wasn't the most profitable event for us, but it was fun.
That's insane. I want to end with a few quick fire questions, if I may.
Sure. And
the first one is, how do you feel about vibe coding?
I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I don't know if it's going to, I think it's just lower the barriers to entry for people to make stuff. And if they can make stuff that's worth anything, right, just by coming up with it and typing it in, then that's a net positive, right? You just lowered the cost of coding, right? I imagine if you're a developer, you position yourself as better than the vibe coding, right? I'm not going to make the same mistakes that somebody who's vibe coding will, right? So you're the better, whereas vibe coding is the abundant, right? Lowering the cost of participating. I think it's awesome. I don't think it's great for coders, but I think maybe it is.
Yeah.
It just,
I think the elite level coders will get rarer and rarer, and their time will become more and more valuable because they'll actually be able to unpick all the problems that the vibe coders have created, right? But I totally agree. It reduces the barrier to entry. My business partner literally sat there kind of starting to vibe code. He's in Cursor making a few different things, and he's like, "Hey, look at this thing that I bought. Look at this thing that I made. Look at this thing that I made." And just little things that have like their own specific function, like one thing. And those kind of tools work pretty well. I think if you try to combine lots of different functions together, the thing gets complicated, and that's when like things can break. And maybe a vibe coder doesn't always understand how to fix things. But then I've seen SaaS companies around me that are doing 100K a month, scaling upwards, just vibe coders. Nobody with any actual coding background or experience. So it's kind of insane.
Because you have people who are maybe speaking the language of the customer, or I don't know, not your typical developer type that might not have that language at their disposal, and is able to provide supply to a real market demand, right? They're doing 100K of revenue that is being consensually spent by customers looking to solve the problem that this vibe coding has solved for them. And I think it's incredible. I love it. On the compatibility piece, you would hope that it goes the way of Shopify and not the way of WooCommerce, where everything's incompatible. And I think to the same effect, teams, whether it's at agencies or it's in-house at brands or it's a completely different organization, the quality of the final product of the organization is determined by how compatible things are. The code's not compatible, the team aren't compatible. The web guy says, oh, things would convert, but unfortunately ads are sending bad traffic. And if ads are saying, oh, well, actually you need to update the website, and if email's saying, oh, well, we're getting bad traffic, no one's taking responsibility. You need compatibility for things to work, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting how the conversations around marketing are now really blending into the conversations around tech and software. It almost feels like our whole conversation is intertwined between the two, right? And I feel like that's like where the industry is really going, because a lot of the tools that marketers are using are gonna the best. If you have access to the best tools, you're probably going to end up being the best marketer. It's the truth. So yeah, it's interesting where this whole thing's
exactly
going.
What you said, right? It's a tool, like a calculator, right? The mathematician doesn't, look at the calculator and go, "Oh no, it's trying to steal my job," right? It enables people to move forward. It lowers the barriers of entry. It's a tool, right, to get the job done.
Yeah. Okay, I've got another question for you. If you could save 1 out of 2 people, would it be a performance marketer or a brand marketer?
If I could save.
Yeah, so let's say there's 2 people and like you can only keep one of them, and then the other one is gonna fall off a cliff or something. Which one would you save?
Oh man. So brand marketer is somebody who has the brand identity at heart when they're taking product to market. Right? They're trying to convey the brand as well as possible.
Yeah.
Brand marketer, performance marketer, brand marketer. I think brand marketer. Yeah, I think brand marketer. Keep the creative person who understands the constraints around the brand and why it exists over the person who is looking at some sort of payback period, some sort of time frame in which they need to deliver on performance. Because that time period could be really short, and it could be against even the long-term best interests of the performance of that brand. I keep the brand marketer.
Interesting. For me, I think it depends. It depends on the brand that you're working with. If it's a direct response brand where you're making a claim about the product and you're just trying to substantiate the claim itself, that often is doing the heavy lifting. So in that situation, I think I'd probably save the performance marketer. If it's a brand which is dependent on the look and feel of the brand, that being repeated so many times that people just get imprinted in their mind, when they think about a problem, they think about that brand. I think that's when brand marketer is like probably more important. I think the world needs both. That's the truth. And but I think for me, I think it depends on the type of client that you're working with or type of brand that you're working with. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. It depends on who's more worth their salt, right? It might be it depends answer, which is never fun. It's never sexy.
Yeah.
But it might be an it depends answer because like who is it that's generating the best outcomes for the brand? Got to keep that person, right? But the thing with performance marketer, I think that a lot of the time you actually need someone like you who understands the numbers in place. And when it comes to the marketers, you need people who are really good at one or two things, right? Like they're really good at creative. They're really good at, I don't know, maybe clicking the buttons in the platform. But the platform's trying to make it as easy as possible for you to click the buttons because ideally there are less barriers to entry and it's easier for you to get into the platform and spend, for a brand owner, let's say, and spend $1,000 and do it profitably. Because then you'll do it again tomorrow. But if you spend $1,000 and you only make $500 because you were incapable of using the platform in front of you, then it's harder for the platform to be profitable. So they're trying to make it as intuitive, as easy as possible to use. So yeah, it's all about like where is the arbitrage for that brand and over what time frame. I think a performance marketer sometimes can optimize for the wrong outcomes, like ROAS, for example, right? You're going to see your highest ROAS and your lowest CPA from people who don't need much persuading. Your returning customers, for example. A performance marketer who's like maybe not worth their salt might optimize for that ROAS number, serve too many ads to existing customers, have a great ROAS, have a really low CPA, but end up dumping a huge amount of the marketing budget of that organization that they're working with into reacquiring existing customers, as opposed to expanding the active customer base of that brand. That, in my opinion, is like the decider. Is the performance marketer actually driving performance across the appropriate time frame for the brand? Or are they do they have one or two numbers that they have to string together across let's say a 7-day window or a 30-day window that represents performance to them?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was actually at the Meta head offices in Dublin about a couple of weeks ago. And one big thing they're pushing, it was an event all about measurement. And the big thing they're pushing right now is like incremental lift, right? So they've got an attribution method called incremental lift, I think it's called. So they're pushing this narrative massively from Meta as well. They're just basically saying that, hey, go for the conversions that would not have happened. Bring people into the funnel. Don't just go for people who are already in the funnel, and would have just converted anyway. So, and we've done some testing with that, and we've had mixed results really. So we're not sure where we stand on it at the moment, and it's a relatively new feature, but interesting to see how Meta is pushing this same narrative that you're talking about here. Interesting
I'm kind of okay with, like, let's say incremental return customer orders, right? Return customer orders that would otherwise have not been achieved without an interaction with, advertising, right? I'm kind of okay with that. It's overspending to not grow the business, to not take the product to the market and expand the amount of customers that you're acquiring, and just looking at one or two metrics as a measure of performance, like let's say ROAS, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of reasons why your ROAS can be high, but that's not in the best interest of the business. I know I'm preaching to the choir with you on this one, but I've been in calls with brands before and their internal marketing teams where they're like, we got the ROAS from 4 to 5 and everyone's celebrating, but the business is dying. It's getting smaller week on week, month on month. And right, the gap between input, output, ad spend, and revenue is getting more favorable, but they're both going down. And that's not a good outcome. So I couldn't agree more with you. Yeah, I'd love to see this incrementality product work out and be a net benefit and maybe even the default. And the only way you can optimize for certain events in Meta, that'd be amazing, right? So that the barriers to entry are just toppled down so that your bowling strikes, with the guardrails up, and it becomes about the product and the creative and the marketing and not about like the fiddly little buttons in the platform.
Yeah.
because
That's
they're
definitely
kind of,
that's definitely where Meta is pushing us towards. They're trying to get us to the point. I don't know if you saw Zuckerberg talking about it, but they're trying to get us to the point where you literally plug in a product and it does everything else for you, which is kind of scary to me because it means like, whoa, like are they just going to do our job is going to be gone, right? As marketers, we're just going to be replaced by an algorithm. Who knows? But it's interesting. I have one final question. So I want to ask you, what has been the hardest, or what is the hardest thing about building Foreplay?
the hardest thing about building Foreplay is that people come to Foreplay with the highest level of intent when they first start using Foreplay. When they see the first ad or they see the first creator talking about Foreplay and they start a free trial. And then 7 days later, life has got in the way. They may not have integrated Foreplay into their workflow. Maybe something happened in life. They got sick, or they just got a bunch of work dumped on their desk. It's a lot of operators and executors that use Foreplay, not so much leaders. So at the end of that 7-day period, they log back in. Maybe it's 8 days, maybe it's 9 days, 10 days later, and they're not able to access their account. And they go, you know what? I wasted my free trial, on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that's the hardest thing about Foreplay is maintaining that level of intent or recapturing that level of intent at the end of their 7-day free trial.
Yeah, that I can totally understand that because I do the same thing myself with different softwares, and to the point where like we'll end up in the past we've signed up to so many different software trials, even paid for trials, and then started paying it for a monthly, and then it just doesn't get used. And we actually went through a process last year of doing a bit of a spreadsheet of the different tools that we use, and we've got over 100 different subscriptions to things. I think probably 80 or 90 of those are actually softwares, and then there's some other subscriptions. We literally have more softwares than people in the company, which is insane, right? And then I did a bit of an audit, and we realized that we're not even using most of these tools. So it's about like not just about getting new tools, but it's actually about getting uptake on these tools and making them useful for people. So how we've tackled this, because I recognize this is a problem with, especially with AI tools, where there's like a new shiny thing every single day, and I'm forwarding it to my managers saying, "Hey, set up a trial on this, set up a trial on that." What we do is we run like mini challenges. I found this really useful, so I just want to share this with everybody. But we use an app called Matter App. Some of you may have come across it. It's on Slack. It's basically like a internal token or a coin that you can share with people. So if somebody does something good, based around your company values or whatever it is, you can send them some coins, and those coins accumulate, and then you can redeem them against vouchers on different stores. And they cover like, I don't know, 60 plus countries. So most of the countries where we hire people, they're able to redeem the coins and buy whatever they want to buy with them. Anyway, so what we do is we have a weekly challenge where we set a bit of a bounty in terms of number of coins, and the manager who's running that challenge will say, "Hey, whoever gets the best entry this week will get, I don't know, 200 coins, 500 coins. I've got a bounty out right now for who can build the best N8N workflow, and I'll give them 750 coins." So I had a few people send me entries that I need to review and offer the reward on. But anyway, so we've used that to actually get uptake on new tools. So the manager will see a tool, test it out themselves, see if it's any good. If they feel like it's good, they'll then create a challenge. And we have weekly challenges definitely for our post-production team. We have a weekly challenge. For other teams, it's a bit less frequent, where every single week they've got to test a new tool. At the end of the week, they submit their entries on how they use the tool, and we assess them all. And then the manager's like, "Oh, that's the best one." And we do it all publicly, so everybody can kind of see and learn from each other and kind of jam on that. And then we issue points, and then they can go and buy Starbucks or shoes or whatever they want to go and buy with them. And that's honestly the best way I found to get uptake on new tools, especially the AI tools, which are just coming out left, right, and center, right? And I actually did an audit on most of my team. So I spoke to almost everybody one-to-one about how they're using AI and which tools they're using. The teams that were doing these weekly challenges are the teams that had the highest uptake on tools.
I can imagine.
Just as a takeaway, I can't help to solve your problem, but on the other side, from people who are using new tools and like want to get utilization out of them, because maybe the founder or the leader has seen something as useful, but then the team is not really using it. That's been like the number one key winning thing for me this year and last year.
I like that, because you're creating quick wins, tight feedback loops for your team to adopt new tools and excel, and then incredible incentives. I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
I mean, it's not just the financial reward; it's the gamification, right? So everyone loves getting coins and getting shout outs. So we have a channel where we just shout people out. So it's a pretty cool way. And every single person in the company gets an allowance, and it's not a huge one. So managers get a bigger one, partners get an even bigger one. But like everybody can give each other coins. So it's a really cool way of incentivizing good behavior.
I'd love to add gamification to the Foreplay onboarding so that people are using it adaptively. Like we have agencies that will use Foreplay Spider in the sales process. And I've seen agencies have very overloaded, very expensive sales processes with clients, which sometimes are value packed. Right? They're incredible, the amount of value they provide to the brand on the front end, even sometimes without transacting with the brand. But then there's some agencies out there, they'll just pull up Spider, pull up one of their competitors or a market leader, and that level of insight and that light bulb moment, their eyes widening or they're leaning in the call to see this tool, they're just like, wow, these guys get it. So if we could gamify the product in a way where people were doing that and they were able to get exposed to it firsthand while getting these quick wins along the way, I think that might lead to retention because, man, there's just so many brands, agencies out there just not even using the tool in that way. Maybe they'll dip into it once a week to do a little bit of creative strategy, get the 80-20 out of it, and then leave this massive opportunity on the table, right?
Yeah, no, good stuff. Yeah, I think we can wrap the conversation there. So I really appreciate you having you on. It's been like we've dived around so many different topics. We've gone from marketing to tech to like your story to almost accounting, finance, gross margins. We've dipped around a few different things. So yeah, really appreciate having you on. Good chat, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
You too, Shabazz. This was fun.
Peace.